Hi there once again, and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial. And in this one we're going to be building this, which is what's known as a delta expression. And it works in a similar way to the MoGraph delay effector, although it's not quite the same, and it's also similar to the memory node. In order to achieve this, we're going to be using a node that we've never actually used before, and it's certainly a node that I've never actually used in any expression before, which is the track node. And that's going to be the all-important node that allows us to create this particular effect. That's what we're going to be about in this tutorial. So without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. We'll start by bringing in a sphere, and we'll give it a radius of 20 centimeters. Now we're going to be moving this sphere backwards and forwards along its x-axis. So in our coordinates, if we move the sphere to -100 along the x and we record a keyframe there, we can then think in terms of moving 60 frames, and we'll record at 100 centimeters there. So we'll just put a keyframe there, and then move through to 120 frames, and we'll put it back to -100 and record again. So that gives us one cycle, and that's doing exactly what I needed to do. Now if I go into my timeline F-curve window here and select the actual curve, in my functions I can say track after, repeat after, and that's exactly what I want. So I want this to repeat for the 960 frames I've allowed in the timeline. So if we play now, we can see that we're just going to get that result. So that's doing exactly what I needed to do. Great, so that's the first part of this worked out. Moving on from here, we will need to create 5 arrows. So we'll start with a spline pen, draw the profile, and get that dropped into an extrude. And that's our next step. I'll switch to my top view, so F2, and the arrow is going to be facing along the Z axis. So if we grab a hold of our spline pen, just move a little bit closer. I've got snapping on, and in my snapping here, grid work plane, I've just set it to grid point. So that's all set up and ready to go. If we just hit escape, or rather, let's just remove that spline. Now, where are we? If we start, say here, just move out a little bit, start on this grid point here, and we'll come down to this point around here. I think that will be okay, or maybe we'll go, I don't know. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. I think that'll be okay. So if we go to there and come back into here, we can then come down around halfway through this next square that you can see on the grid, somewhere there, and then just take this out to here and then up to here. And that gives me the profile that I'm looking for. That's fine for our arrow. You can, of course, do it any way you wish, but that's what I'm going to choose to do. Now, the next thing we need to do, I'll just hit F1 to go back to our 3D view. Our spline needs to be dropped into an extrude, so I'll hold down my option key and select an extrude, drop that into there. We can see that it's far too deep, so in the Object tab we can say 5 centimeters for the offset, and in the caps we'll give this a size, when it comes to the rounding, of 1 centimeter, just to make things look nice. Okay, great. The next thing we need to worry about is the actual model mode, and we need to worry about our axes. Where are they within our spline? What we will do is in our tools, select axis center, and we've got this set so that our Z is -100. If we hit execute, that should give us our splines axes set where they need to be, and they are. We can see that they're here. Now our extrude is currently over here. Now we need to move that to the position of our spline. So the easiest thing to do is just drop the extrude into the spline. In our coordinates, just zero this out, and then we can place the spline back in the extrude. Fantastic. So we've got the coordinates exactly where we need them to be. The next thing we need to worry about is duplicating all of our arrows. But before we go there, we'll just rename this arrow, and we'll give it a target tag, and we'll make it target the sphere. And if we then, in our coordinates, we can see that we've got 23.9625 as our starting point for our arrow. It's pointing directly at the sphere. If we wish to, we could move it slightly closer. In fact, it might be an idea to. So let's just go into our top view, so F2. What we can do, if we get a hold of, well, we'll switch to world coordinates. If we just move the arrow upwards to here, we're now saying 33.6901, and that I think is a better starting point because it gives us more range when the arrow is moving. So we'll leave the arrow there. That's looking great. And now what we can think about doing is, having taken note of 33.6901, that's going to be quite important, we can actually copy this arrow. What I'll do is, in my basic tab here, I'll just disable the target tag for now, close this up, and then we can think about duplication. So again, I'll switch to my top view, so F2, and then start duplicating these arrows. So Command key held down, I'm going to drag this one down to here, so 2 squares apart. Do the same thing again, and again, and then one last time, so that we get 5 arrows. Fabulous. So we've got those in, and they're set up for us and ready to go. What we'll do is just set this up something like that. The next thing we can worry about will be the expression that's going to drive all of this. So we'll bring in a null, call it Expresso, and we're ready to think about adding a tag, an Expresso tag. We've got the editor open, and we're ready to start doing some work. The first thing I'm going to bring in is the all-important track node. So in our general tab here, come down just below time, and we've got track. At the moment it's got a yellow top because it needs something fed into it. What we'll do is take a look down here, and we can see that we've got a track field. If we open the dope sheet and we open the sphere position, we've got position X. Now that's what we're interested in. So if we just twirl that open, we can see we've got our curve in there. With the eyedropper, if we select the position X, we can see that it's now in the track field, and straight away the yellow top has disappeared. So that's all good, and it's ready for the next step. Now, at the moment we've just got position X, we've got nothing at the input stage. What we'll do, I'll just hold down my control key, and I can say in my ports, show names. And now we can see that there's a time input here. So we need a time node. So we'll bring one of those in, and we can plumb that into the track node. Now the way the track node works, it will output the position X value of our sphere at a given time. That's how it works. Now, in order to make this behave in the way that I want it to, I'm not going to plumb the time directly into the time port. What I'm going to do is bring in a math node, and we'll make this a subtract. Now, initially, what we'll do is subtract. I'm just going to say subtract 10. So in the output 2 here, or input 2, I beg your pardon, I'm just going to say subtract 10, and I'm going to plumb my output of my time node into the subtract, and then I'm going to plumb the output of the subtract into the time. But before I do that, I must change my data type to time, because you can't deal with anything else. You must say time. Even though time appears to be a real value, it's a specific data type, and you must work with that data type, otherwise nothing will happen. We can now plumb that into here. So we've got it set up that far. What we can do is, if we just to demonstrate this, let's have a look, see where we are. Now that's arrow number 1. I need to just reorder these so that they're in numerical order. So I've got my first arrow, and I can drag that into the editor window. We can then say, in fact, what I need to do first is give the arrow a rotation port at the input stage, and we're going to rotate this arrow around its rotation H. So if we add that port there, then we're ready to go. So that's that part dealt with. And then we can think about range mapping. Now let's get a hold of a range mapper. So we'll come down to calculate, bring one of those in, and we can place this over here. Now our input range will be a user-defined input range. Our output range will be degree, and we can plumb our value into the input. Our input lower will be -100, because we know our sphere starts over here at -100 and it goes to 100 over here. So obviously our input upper is going to be 100. And our arrow, we know, starts at this value here. So I'm going to select that value, just copy that, and we can paste that into here. So we've got our value, and now I can copy that and paste it in here and put a minus sign in front of it. And that gives us our output range. We don't need to worry about the spline on this occasion. We won't be bothering to use that. And we can plumb this in here. Now, let's just see what that does with our first arrow. So if we just play this. So that's not really doing much. There's no, it's rotating correctly, but it's not doing what we want it to do. Let's just check the subtract. At the moment we've got 0 frames in there, and it reset back to 0 when I changed the data type. So we'll just put 10 in there. So we're subtracting 10 frames from our time. And let's see what happens now. And now we can see that there's a delay. We've got a time delay in there. So that's working very nicely, and it's doing what we want it to do. It's creating that delta expression. Now, in order to get it to work with all of our arrows, we need to group them into a null. So if we shift select and option G to group, call this arrows, and open it up. We can then bring in a hierarchy node. So in our iterators, hierarchy. And at the moment, this is not referencing the correct object. So we just need to select arrows in there, and now it's referencing that. So it will look at the children and output those. The next thing we need is an object index node. So we've got one of those. Bring that in there. We can connect the output of the hierarchy to the instance input port. And then we're ready to do a little bit more work. Now, up here, we can bring this up here, and we can add an object port. Just place that at the top. Get a hold of that, place it up there. That's ready to go. We don't need to plumb that in yet. And then The last node that we need will be a condition node, so we'll bring one of those in, so a logic condition. It needs 5 inputs, so we'll add 3 more. And then we can look at it over here. Now the data type, once again, this must be time. So we'll give it a time port there, or a time data type, so that we've got all time ports. And then the index value that's coming out of our object index here, we can use to switch the condition. Let's move that out of the way a little bit and move this down here. Now, we can put 10 frames in our first slot, 20 in the second, 30, 40, and finally 50. So we've got all of those values ready to go. Now all we need to do is plumb the output of the condition into the subtract, or the input 2 of the subtract. And then to finish it off, we just need to plumb the instance output into the object input of the arrow. And you can see that this has already started to work. So let's just close it up, return to 0, and let's see what happens now. And there you go. So each of our arrows has been given a completely different level of delay. The first is 10, then 20, 30, etc. So that's how this is working. And the beauty of this, of course, is that you've got control over it here. I mean, if you don't want it in that order, you could say put 40 in there. You could put 20 in here. And we give it a different look. Again, we can put 50 at the top here, and we can put 10 down here. And it reorders things and makes them work slightly differently. So this is quite a versatile expression. You know, it's simple, but quite versatile. It allows you to do some quite interesting things. So have a little play with it and see what you can come up with. See what ideas you can come up with. Another thing that I also did, if we just stop this, if we go to this file I've got here, what I did with these arrows, I made, when they're at their 0 position, I made all of them point directly at the center of the sphere, noted all of their start positions. If we open this up, slightly bigger expression. So I noted all of their start positions and obviously their finish positions, which are the negative equivalents. If we select this, we can see that their starting positions are here in degrees, and their finish positions is just the same numbers with negative, well, the negative values are the same numbers. I've got a couple of degree nodes in here because we need to convert from degrees to radians in order to make the next part of this work. And in the range mapper, I've added at the input stage here output lower and output upper ports and plumb the results of these into them. So it is slightly more involved, this expression, but not a great deal. And then when we play this, we should start to see that we've got the arrows moving in slightly different ways. We can see that the front arrow moves more than the next, and then slightly more than the next, and so it goes on until our arrow here isn't moving anywhere near as much. So, you know, there's quite a lot you can do with this. It's quite versatile, as I say. So have a little play around and see what you come up with, see what ideas it gives you. And yeah, I mean, just see if you can use it in any of your projects. But that about completes this tutorial, because that's what I wanted to show you. And it's quite a nice little expression, and the track node, as you can see, it does have its uses. If you've got some keyframe animation in there and you want to play around and do some stuff with this, then it's quite nice to have a play about with. So, as always, I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that it's given you a few pointers for things that you might be able to incorporate in your own projects. And if you have enjoyed the video, then please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and of course, ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, please do share this video, because all this good stuff really does help keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that just about brings the curtain down on this one. So I'll see you very soon on the next tutorial.